First of all, fellas, hello, welcome to it. My name is Bradley Gleason. I will be your host today. Little dip in the lip. We're feeling good today. We're feeling good because since the end of the UFC season, things have not slowed down. We have had a plethora of news and things to talk about. Usyk Tyson, a fantastic fight. I thought they got the decision right. Live scoring, I did have it tied, but I kind of felt, by the end of it, I kind of felt that I might have missed some rounds. There was a couple rounds in there, the third and the eighth, that I was right. I was just teetering on them, and my bias took over. I'm like, I want Tyson to win because I think a third matchup would be so good. But by the end of it, I knew Alexander Usyk was that fucking dude. So we're not going to talk about that. I don't know shit about boxing. I just enjoy it. But we also had big news out of Conor McGregor, just kind of blowing up the scene as he does. Talking about fights with the Paul brothers. We are going to dig into that because I think there's a lot to uncover there. And then we have a handful of fight announcements that we'll get to on the back end, but I'll let you go after that because it is the holidays. It's time for the family, for the drinks, for the snacks. It's time to get a little bit fat. It's time to make some New Year's resolutions, maybe come back a little bit stronger on the back end of it. But let's start with the big news of the, not week, because it is, at this point it is a couple weeks old. Conor McGregor, December 17th. Let me set the scene for you. I am in Florida. I just got done running a half Ironman. Yeah, I'm like that, brother. Check the bags, man. I'm like that. But anyways, I was flying. I was getting ready to fly home. I had a very early flight. It's 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe 5:30. I opened my phone for the first time that day. And what do I see on my screen? I see a tweet from Conor McGregor that reads, "The rumors of a bout with Topuria are false. I am in preliminary agreements with the Ambani family to face Logan Paul in boxing expedition in India. I have agreed. I will then seek my return to the octagon." What the fuck? We always kind of felt, let's be honest, we always kind of felt like this was an option. Since Jake's, first fight, not first fight because he was fighting a lot of YouTubers, but since he knocked out Nate, I'm pretty sure almost immediately after that fight, or maybe it was the Askren fight, but he made a video calling out Conor McGregor being mad disrespectful to his wife, the whole shebang in Jake Paul fashion. He did it to Conor McGregor. So that was always kind of in the zeitgeist. It was in the realm of possibilities, but just the way things have played out, Conor breaking his leg, and just all the other shit that follows Conor McGregor, it didn't really seem like it was in the cards. Jake just had a massive fight with Mike Tyson. We're kind of thinking, who's next? Who's next? Like, you can't get bigger. That's not possible. So you can only get, stronger. We're thinking Canelo. We're thinking, I don't know. A host of boxers called him out. But then Conor McGregor says this. And I'll be honest, it got me excited. There's a notion, and I've heard this from listening to other people talk about their feelings on this fight and Conor McGregor in general. It's like, if we had the choice between Conor in the UFC and Conor in, a boxing match against a Paul brother, what would we rather see? And I think a lot of people are saying Conor in the UFC, we want him back in the UFC. My point is, for what? For what? He goes out there, best case scenario, beats Michael Chandler, and then what? I want to see him in big fights. I want to see him in the circus. Conor performs best in the circus. And to be honest with you, all due respect, I'm not sure he's going to be competitive if he comes back to the UFC. I'm just not sure he's going to be competitive. Could he give Michael Chandler a good run? For sure. But then what? What are you going to give him, Charles Oliveira? Are you going to give him Islam? Fuck no. Fuck no. He'd have to knock Michael Chandler out cold for me to even be like, okay, the boy's back. I don't see a path for him in the UFC that makes sense. So when this came up, I was like, I'm all for it. I don't need to see Conor back in the UFC. I want to see him fight. I do want to see that. Conor McGregor is still big business. But I don't care who he fights. Right now, the talks are either Logan or Jake in boxing, or probably Michael Chandler. Which one sells more? Which one is bigger? The answer is the Paul brothers. It just is. It just is. I would love to see Conor back in the UFC, but I don't need to see that. I don't see anything past one fight that makes sense. And what if he loses? It's true for both sides. What if he loses? It's true for both sides. I think we have one more shot with Conor McGregor. If he wins, he continues. If he loses, you never see him again. Not never see him again, but at least in combat sports outside of, maybe some boxing exhibition matches, kind of how Floyd has played out his career, where he's just taken on who the fuck knows who. I bet Floyd's fought 5 times, and I haven't heard about any of them because he's just rolling in massive paychecks against dudes you've literally never heard of. So I think the draw is going to stop at some point, like it has with Floyd. I'm not saying Floyd couldn't get in a massive fight with like a Pacquiao right now and it would draw in big business. But I think the model that he's running on, that I think Conor McGregor can succeed in the long term, is getting a family like the Ambani family, who, if you don't know, is just some oil and gas like tycoon out of India, just big bills. I mean, we're talking about 123 bill, something like that. I mean, these guys got billions, oil and gas out of India. But it just takes a family like that to just shove money in your face, and then you fight whoever. Now, obviously, the Ambani family is a little bit more ambitious in the fact that they want the global presence of it. They want the TV. They want it to be a big event. Whereas some of the Floyd fights they're more regional. Like, he'll go to China and fight some, I don't know, I can't remember the little blonde kid he fought, but you get what I'm saying. At a certain point, the draw is going to stop. And the way that Conor McGregor, when he did get his fight announced and was on the card for what was it, 303 against Michael Chandler, drew the highest gate way before, not gate, was it gate? Yeah, I think it was like a $20 million gate. And we were still like 5 weeks out from the fight, or 3 weeks out from the fight. He's still going to do that. He's still going to do that. My point is only that he only has one more shot at it in the UFC. If he gets knocked out and or just loses, there's always the opportunity to make fun fights. You could do another Nate Diaz fight. You could do a Dustin Poirier fight. You could. And that would do big business, but the appeal of Conor McGregor is always that winning mentality. That's what made him so special, is his mindset. And I just don't know if that's there anymore. You're not going to get the same guy on the mic that you did back in 2015, 2016, where he was just lighting the world on fire and picking opponents apart before they ever got into the octagon. That's what made him so special. He was drunk in the build-up to Khabib. He was nice in the build-up to Dustin Poirier, and then he was just kind of an angry old guy in the second fight against Dustin Poirier. It doesn't come with that same luster. Is he a star? Absolutely. Is he the biggest draw in the UFC? Absolutely. But I don't necessarily care if I see him boxing or if I see him back in the UFC. I just want to see him. So I think I'm more excited about the prospect of Conor McGregor fighting. I also think it's going to be easier to get done. Maybe not easier to get done. I lied. That part I completely lied about. It'll be much harder to get done just because of what it is and the fact that he still has fights on his contract. But the prospect of him fighting a Paul brother entices me more than him fighting Michael Chandler. Just because I don't know what happens after that. The problem with him fighting in the UFC is you expect more if he wins. With this, it's one and done. That feels safe for Conor McGregor at this point. A one and done fight feels much safer than expecting him to win and then turn around and fight again. Because who? The answer is who? I did kind of get myself hyped up when I was talking about a Diaz and a Poirier fight. I was trying to make a point, and then that would be fun too, you know. And I think those are still good first options, but prospects of a belt is the prospect of getting him in the ring twice sounds daunting at this point because it's been so hard to get him in the ring once. So I like the idea of this. Okay, stage set. I am hopping onto a plane. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I see this and I go, what the fuck is going on? How did we get here? First of all, surprised it was Logan Paul, as I think everybody was, but Jake gave us a little bit of clarification on that end of it shortly thereafter. He said on Twitter, he says, now it all makes sense why Conor McGregor and his management team have been desperately trying to get MVP to negotiate for a fight between us. As we told them privately, I'm now saying it publicly, the only way we're willing to explore me versus Conor in a pro boxing / MMA fight is if Dana White / the UFC are at the table directly or make it clear that they are okay with discussions. Then he says Conor is washed, needs to pause, Logan by however he wants. So what Jake is saying there is basically the Ambani family came to him with this proposition. Conor McGregor's team maybe came with him with this proposition, and rightfully so. He's like, is the UFC on board? That's the problem with Conor McGregor and making this fight right now is he has 2 fights left on his contract with the UFC. So he's still got to talk to daddy, you know? Dana White can still pull the rug out of all of this. And I haven't really seen, because it happened, and maybe smartly by Conor, because it happened after that UFC Tampa, you know, their final fight night of the year, we haven't heard from Dana White. You know, he hasn't. I'm sure come January, when we get into that first fight week, he's going to get questions about this, but we have yet to hear from him. So maybe smartly done by Conor. He's going to let that buzz build before Dana has the opportunity to reject it. And it also gives him time, some space where he can keep trying to convince him, and or, you know, they have time to work something out rather than it being in the middle of like a UFC in their normal scheduling where he'd have to answer it to it almost immediately. So smart play. I don't know if he did that on purpose, but smart play by Conor McGregor. But the overall sentiment here is, you know, they offered Jake. Jake said, if you can get the UFC on board, I'm on board. But as of now, has not happened. We're not in conversations. This is a fictitious fight, which is true. Weird thing is we've heard nothing from Logan Paul. Unless I missed it, I have seen nothing out of Logan Paul saying, yes, this is what's happening. We're in conversations. I am down. I have heard nothing from Logan Paul, which is kind of odd. I did see yesterday via Happy Punch, and I'm sure they weren't the first to report it, but it's where I saw it. They said Jake Paul is back on the table, aiming for between July and September. Which to me means one of two things. To me it means let's be honest, Jake Paul's the bigger fight. We were surprised to see Logan. I was fine with Logan. But Jake Paul is the boxer of the family. He is the big fight. He's the one that has garnered this great boxing attention and has really took it over in his own way. Jake Paul has been boxing. He just fought Mike Tyson. You know, he's been a much more consistent boxer than Logan Paul. It's a bigger fight. Simple as that. It is the bigger fight. And also is reportedly what the Ambani family wanted. They came to him first. Logan was second to the table. But I don't know where this reporting came from, what they heard, what they've seen. It says one of two things to me. One is that Jake Paul is just maybe trying to dig his heels in a little bit more. He will take this fight. Maybe there's been some sort of breakthroughs with the UFC, or maybe he's just like, yeah, if we can get this together, I want to be the one. I don't know if it's possible with Jake Paul, though. That's my biggest problem. The reason I think Jake Paul is the harder fight to make is because Dana White hates him. And we know one thing about Dana White is that he holds a grudge, and he is a nasty motherfucker when it comes to it. Both him and Jake have talked nasty to each other. Nasty. They've been putting each other down for years. Ever since Jake entered this kind of boxing space, Dana's been shitting on him, and Jake has given it right back. And at the end of the day, this all goes through the UFC. The UFC is the puzzle piece in the middle that's going to put this fight together. This fight 100% can happen. We saw Conor fight Floyd. We saw the UFC work with, what was it, Showtime? Or whoever Floyd was fighting under. We saw that merge. So it can 1,000% happen. Can it happen with Jake Paul? I do not know. I think it's more likely to happen with Logan Paul. And I know the reporting came out the other day saying Jake is now in discussions, and it puts some sort of a timetable on it of July to September. But I just don't know if I can see MVP and Jake Paul in conjunction with Dana White. I don't know if they would allow it. I don't know if Dana would do it. I think it's much more likely to be Logan Paul for a couple reasons. There's a ton of crossover between the UFC, Conor McGregor, and Logan Paul. A ton of crossover. And I made a little Venn diagram. Believe it or not, I made a Venn diagram. First Venn diagram over the last, I don't know if I've ever made a Venn diagram before, but here it is. First being Conor McGregor, obviously fighting for the UFC. Logan Paul, the WWE. Why that matters is because TKO Group, which is like the overall umbrella over both those companies, is a TKO Group. I said that weird, but TKO owns both the UFC and the WWE. So that makes negotiations a little bit easier. I'm not sure if... I don't think Logan Paul's on any sort of exclusive deal where he couldn't do this boxing match, but it's nice. It's nice to be there. I'm sure TKO in some sense has worked with Logan Paul as well as they've worked with Conor McGregor. So that makes it easier. Also, Disney. When we're talking about the Ambani family, this is where they really come in. Because, as much as they are just a billfold facilitating all of this, streaming matters. Where is this going to get streamed? How is this going to get streamed? Disney owns ESPN. We know that. They also have a partnership with the Ambani family for Disney Star. Apparently, the Ambani family had some sort of major media network where they were doing stuff in India, and they merged with Disney a handful of years back for a big chunk of change, and now they're in conjunction. So it's Disney Star now, which makes things seamless. Disney's on board, the overall company for ESPN and Disney Star, so streaming is all but done. And that's true for both Logan and Jake, I guess, because the PFL, same shit. I don't really even consider Jake to be a part of PFL, and most of his fights haven't streamed on ESPN. It's been Netflix or DAZN or, you know what I'm saying. But that's nice. So just when we come to streaming rights, the Ambani family is in conjunction with Disney, which makes it easier to either run through ESPN and or just shoot it on Disney itself. I'm not sure if that's, if Disney wants to get in the fight sport combat world, but, ESPN sure as hell does. And, if you look at the Disney app, they have since added like a separate feature within the Disney app that is ESPN's shit. So maybe they are. Also Prime. This is kind of a big one, and it shows a relationship between Logan Paul and Dana White because Prime is the official beverage of the UFC. The only beverage company, I believe. That's not true at all because they have a handful, but it's one of their bigger ones. Monster, Prime. I know I've seen Black Rifle Coffee out there, but it is a massive contributor to the UFC. I'm sure. And I was reminded of this when I looked at Logan Paul's Twitter because, again, he's been radio silent since all this shit happened. But his pinned tweet is a picture of him and Dana White signing for the Prime deal. So it shows some sort of relationship. Obviously, we know about the turmoil that Jake and Dana have. Logan Paul doesn't carry that same baggage. If anything, they seem to be on great terms. They seem to like each other. So that's good. That's easy. And then the last point is that Dana White doesn't hate him. Simple as that. Simple as that. Now, the things that could affect these from both fighters' standpoint, from Logan Paul and Conor McGregor's standpoint, on Conor McGregor's side, it's simply the fact that he has 2 fights left on his UFC contract. He is restricted by that. It's not like if this fight was on his own accord, it would already be done. I guarantee it. Or much closer to done than it is right now. Second thing is drugs and alcohol. Let's be honest. It's hard to get Conor to the cage right now. It's hard to get him focused for an extended period of time to put himself in fighting shape. And I don't know what sort of shape he's in right now. I don't know how he's been doing lately when it comes to that, or how big of a problem it actually is, but it feels like a problem. On the side of Logan Paul, there's not much getting in the way. But there is one thing, and that's that he's not Jake Paul. The Ambani family would prefer to make the Jake Paul matchup. I'm sure Conor would prefer to make the Jake Paul matchup. And the world would prefer it to be Jake Paul. Simply because he is what he is. He's been boxing. So I think that is, when it comes to actual negotiations and getting things done, if everybody wants Jake Paul except for the UFC and Dana White, it just may never be done. But I think if we're going to see it, it's going to be Logan Paul. I just have a feeling on that. I just have a feeling that if it's going to get done, it's going to be with Logan Paul. And I'm not mad at it. Again, I'm a low ganger, dog. I was a low ganger, dog. Growing up, I was a part of the low gang. I freaking love LP, man. I love LP. But just from a boxing standpoint, a competitive fight standpoint, I would rather it be Jake Paul. Not that I don't think Logan Paul has a chance. They're both much bigger than Conor McGregor. But just from his last handful of performances, him losing to KSI, his fight against Dylan Dennis, it wasn't... Jake Paul's must-watch TV because he's been putting motherfuckers out cold and has been dropping some bad motherfuckers. Like Nate Diaz, like Tyron Woodley, like Ben Askren. Saved Mike Tyson, let's be honest. The fight is more interesting if it's Jake Paul. It's just easier to get done if it's not. So I think it's going to end up being Logan, if anything, but I'm not positive that that's even going to happen. But that's my Venn diagram, dog. You like that? A lot easier to make than I thought. It looks kind of intimidating. You think Venn diagram, you think science class. It's 2 circles merged together. You put some shit in the middle. Pretty easy. So we can knock that. I'm going to put that on my resume. I'm going to send it into myself. Just be like, yo, Venn diagram, baby. I make them. Okay. Good on that. We're good on that. Let's talk about some fights that have been announced. First one being, we got a main event for Riyadh, February 1st. Israel, I assume it's the main event. It's the main event, let's be honest. It's a fight night. It's Israel Adesanya. It's the main event. I lied. We've got a main event. Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov. I don't hate this fight. I was kind of hoping Kyle Bahayo if I got my pick. But Nasruddin is coming off a big win against Brendan Allen not too long ago. That was was that in France? I think that was in France. Could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure that was in France. Ranked 5th in division right now. A little bit underrated. Like, you don't hear his name a lot, but he's been on a nice little streak. I mean, if we're looking at his last handful of fights, his last loss was to Sean Strickland back in 2023. But since then, Roman Dolidze, Jared Cannonier, Brendan Allen. I mean, he's earned his right to the top. Still hoping it was Kyle Bahio just because bigger name. But I don't hate that fight. For Israel Adesanya, I'm rooting for the boy. I'm rooting for Izzy here. Obviously, he's had a couple tough ones. His last 2 times out have not looked sensational. So hopefully he can find himself a little bit and get himself back on track. Almost like it feels like this is a do or die spot for Israel Adesanya. Almost like who was it? Who did Rob fight? Who did Rob fight? Who did he knock out cold on short notice? I'm blanking on that dude's name, but that's what I want to see out of Israel Adesanya. I want him to show a level here where he's like, these young contenders aren't beating me. You're gonna have to do it for a while if you want to come take this. And I still see a path back to the championship for Israel Adesanya because we're getting Sean Strickland, Dricus du Plessis. I think you can make, although it's not ideal, I think you could make a 2 for either of those. Let Izzy try to get his get back. I mean, dude was a champion forever. Lapped the division a handful of times. I mean, he earned everything. But also, I think what's more likely to happen is Sean Strickland, Dricus du Plessis fight, and then we get winner of that faces Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev versus Izzy. Take my money. I love that. I fucking love that. So, best case scenario there, rooting for Izzy. Looking forward to that. We also have a presumably co-main event, Shara Bullet versus Michael Venom Page. I love this fight. There's one of 2 ways that this fight's going to go. One is it's going to be an incredible stand-up matchup with 2 of the most unorthodox strikers that the UFC has, or it's going to be boring as a fuck. Where a lot of standing, can't find each other's range. That's the one thing about Michael Venom Page is he has this sort of style where he doesn't stand in a traditional range. He doesn't stand in boxing range. He doesn't even stand in kicking range. He stands outside of it and then leaps into it. He just kind of bounces back and forth. He leaps into range, throws a shot, backs up. So it can create kind of weird fights. Like we saw him fight against Kevin Holland and he won that fight, looked good, but it wasn't an exciting fight. It was just, his moments were better. And he had some nasty elbows. He did some good things. I think he's an exciting fighter. I just think stylistically, there's also a real tendency for it to be kind of so-so just because of the range that he keeps. Sharp Bullet, on the other hand, is a fucking madman. He'll step into the pocket and throw a fucking double spinning back fist. He's out of his mind. He doesn't have the wrestling pedigree of Magomedov, but we want this to be a striking exchange. That's what we love about Shars. He's one of those wild boys out of that region that stands and banks. So I like both of those fights. I'm hoping that we get something exciting out of Magomed and Page, but it could also be a giant dud, and I'm halfway expecting that. Another fight that we got announced, Manel Kape versus Brandon Royval, apologize. Brandon Royval, I love this fight. I think it's going to be an absolute banger. After watching Brandon Royval's last fight against Tatsuro Tara, I'm high on the train, brother. I love me some Brandon Royval. Dude's just a dog. He's a certified dog, and he's got nasty hands. And after watching Manel Kape's last fight, he put on a masterclass on the feet. I mean, absolutely outboxed Alex Perez and was doing it fancy. I mean, it was showboating. It was not the Manel Kape we saw against God damn it. Not the Manel Kape we saw against... How am I blanking on this, man? I'm tough with names today. Don't tell me. Don't you freaking tell me. You're screaming it through the screen right now. I can hear it. Dude that's no longer in the UFC, just fought for Brave FC. His name is Muhammad Mokaev. Thank God we got there. Muhammad Mokaev. I did look it up, I'll be honest. But I know Muhammad Mokaev. I just, he's been out of sight, out of mind. So Yeah, a super boring fight. They stared at each other. Manel Kape came in here and sent a message, and he's like, hey, I deserve to fight at the top. The problem with Manel Kape is he has had a lot of trouble. I want to say he's had a ton of canceled fights or missed weights and things like that, so you always kind of worry about that with him, but the way he looked against, not Alex Perez, Bruno Silva, I mean, he completely outclassed him. So I love that. I'm glad that they didn't give him an immediate title shot because I do love Kai Kara-France getting that shot. I assume that that's what's happening now. The other conversation was going to be Kai Kara-France versus Manel Kape as a kind of number one contender. But because we got this announced and because we got it announced so quickly, it kind of feels like the UFC had other plans. Dana White saying as much in the post-fight press conference. He's not getting the next shot, which just told me that they already had plans for Pantoja. And we kind of assume that's going to be Kai Kara-France. So love that fight too because I love me some Kai Kara-France. Big fan of the boy. But this should be a great fight, should be a stand-up masterclass, and should be a war. Brandon Royval tends to make things wars, and that's what we freaking love about him. So I love that fight. We also have, not announced, but a report for Justin Gaethje versus Dan Hooker, reportedly being discussed for UFC 313 on March 8th, which would be in Vegas. Love that fight too. The Hangman versus Justin Gaethje, take my fucking money. Gonna be a banger. Simple as that. I want to say, and I don't have a graphic for it here, but I want to say I also saw reports that they were trying to make Kamaru Usman and Jack Della Maddalena for UFC 312 in Australia. Also love that fight. Love that fight. The two kind of matchups that we were looking at for Jack Della Maddalena, who he always seems to pop up on this 312 fight card, so I'm assuming he's going to fight there. Hopefully he fights there because it's been a while since we've seen him. I know he had a broken arm, so can't blame him for that, but Kamaru Usman was always kind of 1A. Carlos Prates was calling for that fight. I also would have loved that fight. If that fight gets made, I'm pretty excited about that as well. But we're heading into 2025. Full head of steam. They got some good fight cards coming up. So excited about that. Will we see Conor McGregor back? I do not know. Is it going to be boxing? Is it going to be the UFC? We can only wait to see. Thank you for watching. Yeah, that's it. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, and peace the fuck out.